Hello and welcome to another IELTS video. Today we are looking at the speaking section of the examination, and we're looking at a few strategies that you can follow in certain situations. So I've entitled this video, "What do I do if?" Now in the video we're going to look at a few different situations that can arise while you are engaging the speaking portion of your examination. And I want to provide you with a few phrases that you can use in these situations to help you better control them and to help you better come across to your IELTS examiner as a fluent speaker of English. If you find this video helpful, I encourage you to visit my blog at IELTS.com. And today's video is coming to you in partnership with IELTSpodcast.com. So please also check out that website. There are lots of good resources there too. So let's get started. Now, the first thing we're going to address is, what do I do if I want to share an example to prove my point? So in part 2 of the speaking examination, as you know, you're going to have to speak in a monologue and to share your opinions about a certain topic. Now, often when you're sharing your opinion, it's helpful to use an example, and actually often your cue card will ask you to use an example. But the problem is, how do we introduce this example in our speaking? Well, there are a number of phrases that we can use to do this. So let's go over a few of them. Firstly, we can say, to illustrate this. Now, of course, the word "this" indicates that we have been talking about a topic before, and now we're going to share an example that shows that topic in action. So, to illustrate this, to give you an example, to show you what I mean, and then you might actually continue this to say something like, to show you what I mean, let me give you the example of, and then whatever. A case in point is, so a case, if we were talking about perhaps some successful advertising campaigns, I might say something like, a case in point is the McDonald's restaurant advertising campaign, or the McDonald's restaurant slogan, "I'm loving it," or something like that, if that was the topic that we were talking about. Take McKinsey, for example. So McKinsey could be replaced with whatever our example is. This would be a way to introduce it. So I could say take McDonald's, for example. Or if we're talking about places around the world, I might say take Dubai, for example. Okay, so I hope that helps in that area. Now, what do I do if I need a few extra seconds to mentally prepare my answer? So now this is a question that I get asked all the time, and there are a number of phrases that you can use, and these phrases really help you to sound like a fluent English speaker. So don't be shy in using them. And when you're speaking, there are pauses. There are two kinds of pauses. There are good pauses, or healthy pauses, and there are bad pauses. Good pauses are the kinds of pauses that you even hear when native English speakers are speaking. So these are the kinds of pauses that they're quite brief, and they're just used when a native English, or when an English speaker is trying to prepare their response properly. Now, a bad pause is when a student stops and has to think for an extended period of time. And this kind of pause makes it obvious to the examiner that they are having difficulty thinking of what it is that they're going to say. So we don't want to have bad pauses in our speaking response. So some ways that we can avoid this is to use these following phrases. So now if you're asked a question and you just need an extra couple of seconds to think about what it is you're going to say, try one of these. It's difficult to say Now, if you say it in that sense, I mean, you even give yourself a few extra seconds to think further. So if the examiner asked me something, I'm not really sure what I'm going to say, I might say, it's difficult to say. And then I prepare, in my mind a few seconds what it is I'm going to respond with. Let me think. Well, to cut a long story short, that's a good question. Well, to be honest, now this is a good phrase to use if you're being asked your opinion about something. So, if the examiner asks you, I mean, what maybe you've lived in Dubai for a number of years. What's your opinion of Dubai, the culture, and the lifestyle here? Well, to be honest, and then you can go on from there. It's funny you should ask. Now, this is a phrase that you would probably use if there is some sort of ironic connection between what the examiner is asking you and what it is you are going to respond. Okay, so I hope those are helpful. Now, what do I do if I want to show my examiner that I am actively listening? So an important part of the speaking portion of the IELTS examination is to show that you are engaged in the conversation. So it's not really just you're sitting there, the examiner asks you a question, then you respond, and then you wait. The examiner asks you another question, then you respond, and you wait. No, that's not what you want to do. You want to be engaged. So in part 3 of the speaking exam, you're going to have to share a dialogue with your examiner, and it's very important that you show the examiner that you're fluently speaking the language, which is just as much about listening as it is about speaking. So here are some phrases that you can use to demonstrate to your examiner that you are involved in what the topic is of your conversation. So try phrases like, "That's an interesting point." And then this also helps you lead off from something that the examiner says. "I was interested in what you said about." Now, this could be a phrase that either the student might say or the examiner might say. But if the examiner is talking about something, and then you want to perhaps engage in the conversation, so you might actually use a phrase like this to talk about something the examiner had brought up previously in what they were saying. So I was interested in what you said about, and then whatever, and then maybe even you could ask them a question at this point too. So when you say leadership, do you mean... Oh, I'm sorry, did I miss something here? Oh, no. Okay, sorry. I think I meant to put in here, what do I do if I don't fully understand what the examiner's question is? I'm sorry, I missed my one of my small subtitles here. But anyways, so what do I do if I don't fully understand what the examiner is asking me? So it's okay to clarify. Please understand that it's not instantly a mistake if you ask your examiner to clarify themselves, because even native speakers do this. Sometimes if something's being asked of somebody and you don't 100% understand exactly what they're getting at, it's okay to ask them to clarify. Now, of course, I mean, you can't ask them every single time to clarify. That's obviously not going to work in your favor. But if you are asked something and you didn't hear clearly, or perhaps there's a phrase that you think you understand but you're not quite sure, it's okay. Just ask them to clarify. So when you say leadership, do you mean... So we can use this, of course, leadership we could replace with anything. Could you explain what you mean by... Okay, so these kinds of phrases are okay to use to clarify what it is you're being asked. Now, what do I do if I have been talking about a topic and I want to stop talking about it. Or in other words, I want to reach a conclusion. So in part 2 of the exam, you're talking, you're delivering your monologue. You're talking to your examiner about a certain topic, and you've been talking for a bit of time about it, and now you want to come to some sort of conclusion, or you want to stop the monologue on a good, or in a good way. So what are some phrases that we can use to do this? Now, if you've been talking about the good and bad points about something, I'd recommend using a phrase like, so weighing up the pros and cons, I feel that, and then deliver whatever your conclusion is. Or perhaps, I think most people can generally agree that. Okay, so a good phrase to use if you're being asked, for your thoughts on perhaps the place where you live, or if you're being asked about a certain topic in the world, and you just want to come to some sort of general conclusion. I think most people can generally agree that. So all in all, I would argue that essentially what I feel is the most important point is, so to sum up, and that is a helpful phrase. Sometimes, to be totally honest with you, and I'm not sure if there are any other IELTS instructors or examiners listening to this video, but the word "some" is, I think, sometimes used excessively. I find students these days seem to use it all the time. Every essay I mark, it seems to have at the end the word "sum up." So maybe this is a phrase. I mean, of course, it's not incorrect to use it, but might be one I don't know, maybe not the best one to use, just because it's used so regularly. So I'd say my conclusion is that it looks like we can agree that. Now, of course, this is probably something that you would use perhaps in part 3 of the speaking exam when you're talking with your examiner. If there's some area that's common between the two of you, or an opinion that you both share, you might want to use a phrase like, "Oh, it looks like we can agree that living standards in Dubai are very high," or whatever. Okay, so I hope that that video helps sort out a few of the issues that you might have with different situations that you might face on the speaking portion of the examination. Now, if you have anything else that you would like to share, or phrases that you want to check whether they would be accurate or inaccurate, or even phrases that you feel are helpful to speakers in this portion of the examination, please leave them as a comment, and then we can discuss and perhaps create a bit of a list between us that could become a good resource for other IELTS students around the world. So thank you for listening, and have a nice day.